at the end. And now, Sarah, take it away.
Okay, hi everybody. I see 31 people, and a minute ago there were 27, so I think that people are beginning to come in. It might be helpful if for now you mute yourself in case there are conversations about people having trouble getting in, etc. For those of you who know me, I'm a volunteer docent at the Smithsonian American Art Museum and the Renwick. And I'm very excited about this presentation today because we're looking at two views of the West. Many years ago, we started collecting works of art about the West, and we had a book and we had an exhibit called Lure of the West. And the Lure of the West had beautiful landscapes and romanticized views of the people who lived in the West. And our museum collection was really dominated by those views that came from the 18th century, no, the 19th century and the early 20th century. And then as we started really looking at the West at the museum, we just sponsored an exhibit called The American West, How Many Wests. That was the name of the exhibit. And in this exhibit, we looked at different viewpoints about the people who lived there, about the landscape, and we really updated our collection. And the Many Wests exhibit also highlighted many voices, including people who identify as Black, women, Asian Americans, Latinx, LGBTQ, all the people who have a stake in claiming the American West. And we looked at painting and sculpture and photography and mixed media, and we actually featured 48 different contemporary artists. The exhibit sadly has closed, but it was done in conjunction with 5 other museums. And today, even though mostly I show works that are in the Smithsonian's collection, you'll see some other works like from Boise, Idaho, from different places. And we really are starting to take a more nuanced and multifaceted look at the American West. Now, I will say to you all that I just got a new computer and I've learned some new things, but the touch is just a little different. So if I float around a little bit, bear with me. Okay, so let's start with this just gorgeous image by Thomas Moran. One of the things that we can do in a video presentation is we can look at works that are not on view. And this one is in storage somewhere, but it's simply gorgeous. Thomas Moran went west a number of times, and he went with the Haydn expedition in 1871. And with him was the photographer William Henry Jackson as well. And when they came back from this expedition that was really to explore the West, they tried to get the US Congress to appropriate land for national parks. And that was actually the impetus for making Yellowstone a national park. So this is not Yellowstone. This is the upper cliffs of the Colorado River. And, Moran knew that this was just a gorgeous site and that it would really appeal to Easterners and the Eastern art market. But at this particular site on the Green River was a rowdy settlement between these sandstone cliffs, and it had popped up overnight because of the railroad. But, you know, it was banks and laundries, and it wasn't so romantic. It was a lot of wooden structures. And so Moran decided he's going to paint it like it looked when the Indians were in this area. So instead of a rowdy settlement, how do you like that I can blow this up? Anyway, instead of a rowdy settlement, he just pictured this absolutely beautiful beautiful scenery, harking back to the times when it did belong to the noble savages, when it belonged to the American Indians. And it's interesting that Moran actually worked for the Northern Pacific for a while, creating images that would get people to travel west on the railroad. So what a beautiful romantic site. All right, so we ready to go? Now, I want you to look at these, and I'm going to bring up the chat, and I'm going to look at the chat as well. And I want, these are American Indians by the painter George Catlin. George Catlin went west about 6 times in the 1830s. He was a disgruntled lawyer, but it was his mission to create as many portraits and paintings of the landscape and Indians living day-to-day life as he possibly could. And he was hoping that his gallery would be bought by the US government. So first of all, let me ask you, what do you think these people have in common in these particular paintings? And then we'll talk about them. So you can just put your answer in the chat box. Do they have anything in common?
I am watching for you, Sarah. So far, I don't have any comments.
I don't see any. Anybody? They're dressed ceremonial. Their noses are similar. They're dressed for the photographer. And actually, this is a painter, Carla, but they're certainly dressed for the painter. And Doug says wistfulness. They're kind of none of them are looking straight on. They're looking away from the camera or the painter, sorry, I got a little confused there. And their grim, gloomy attitude, they're definitely very serious. And they are definitely dressed in their ceremonial best. These are part of 300 portraits that we have in the museum. He painted about 500 portraits. And I want to tell you just a little bit about a few of them. This man, I'm going to do this again. I'm so excited about this. This sitter was, his name is Surrounder. He was the chief of a tribe, and his tribe lived on the plains, but in timber lodges. So they weren't migratory necessarily, and they lived on a ridge overlooking the Platte River. And not only is he dressed in his ceremonial best, but he's telling us that he's part of the Bear Clan, and he's killed a bear. You know, he uses parts of the bear, and also the decoration here is actually porcupine quills. He was probably painted in 1832 at Fort Leavenworth. one of the things that Catlin did was he displayed his Indian gallery all along the East Coast. And he really, as I said, wanted the US government to buy it. He wanted them to buy the whole gallery, and the Congress refused, said it was way too much money. So he actually takes his Indian gallery to Europe. And it's extraordinarily expensive to do this. He travels to Paris, he travels to London, to great acclaim, actually. And the woman and the child in this particular painting probably went with, oh, he did paint women, often the wives of the chiefs. And she definitely went with him to London in the 1840s. And so if you notice down below, this one, I'm sorry, it's hard to see, was painted in 1844. So he painted this couple in London. And then Little Wolf, who's over here, was an Indian warrior. He's not part of the Bear Clan, but he's very, he's very proud of his accomplishments. He also traveled to Europe, and, disease really affected a lot of these people. So this Iowa warrior died in Paris. And Catlin actually loses his wife and son on the trip too. They both died. It's sad that Catlin actually went to debtor's prison because he just couldn't afford to take this show on the road anymore. And so a man named Joseph Harrison said, look, if you give me your collection, I'll get you out of debt. So he gave him about 300 of his works. He kept some of them so he could keep painting them. And when Harrison died, they gave the whole collection to the Smithsonian American Art Museum. So the government got it after all, but through a roundabout way. If you go to the National Gallery of Art in Washington and in other places, you might see Catlin portraits, and those aren't the original 300, but those are often paintings that he did of the originals. So you could call them originals as well. Okay, we have 93 people. Yay, you're finally getting in. So I'm delighted to see you. For those who just come in, my name is Sarah Shube, and I'm a volunteer docent at the American Museum, the Smithsonian American Art Museum. So part of this romanticized vision of going west, of course, is striking it rich in the gold rush. And just look at this beautiful painting. We don't have to talk about it, but I want you to look all over the painting. And gorgeous scenery of California. It's a sunny day. Now, I will say that these people probably are working hard. He's got an axe and, he's loading the trench, and he's drinking some water. It is hard work. And so people would go west to strike it rich. But these two men, Charles Knoll and August Wenderoth, they went west as entrepreneurs rather than adventurers. And they built a painting studio in Sacramento, and they painted the waves of prospectors that came west. And if you notice, this is 1851, 52, and California becomes a state in 1850. So this is already after statehood, but it's really, what a wonderful place to strike it rich. I also want to show you this little detail up here. What do you notice about the clothes hanging on the line here. They're red, white, and blue. So not only is this a romanticized version of what it's like to strike it rich in California, but it's so patriotic if you go west as well. And even if we were to see this painting up close, there's red, white, and blue in the clothing that the people wear too. So just another touch to say, you know, life in the West is just wonderful. And it wasn't quite so wonderful, right? Okay, now I really want you to talk about this painting. It was created by a man named Emanuel Leitze, who is a German immigrant, and it's called Westward, the Course of Empire Takes Its Way. And it's a, whoops, that's what I mean. That's where I start having trouble. Hold on, I have to move this to get back to my PowerPoint. So what I want you to do is think about this painting in two parts. Make an imaginary line down the center. Look at the background. Look at how one side differs from the other. And really start taking a look at the things that you see. And think about this imaginary line down the middle. And I'm going to blow it up a little and move around the painting a bit. So what do you notice about this painting of Going West? Put your answers in the chat box. Somebody's a Bierstadt fan. Great. So why are you a fan? They can't hear. It says someone can't hear me.
Mm.
I'm not
No,
on mute.
No, your sound is fine, Sarah. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm wondering if maybe they thought they could hear another guest.
So we have Christian missionaries. And why do you say that? Children expressing hope for the future. Look at the skeleton. They did reach the summit here. We have the mountains and the Indians left. Where are the Indians? I don't see any Indians. On the right, we have these mountains. We have the crosses where someone has died and been buried. What else do you notice? How is the left different from the right in terms of the scenery, perhaps? I'm going to go out again. Well, they're definitely going in regardless of the strife. This poor guy down here has been wounded. They've lost somebody. Can you imagine taking a covered wagon up this steep area? The left is sunny and welcoming. We hope so. That's the West. That's California. And they're coming out of the mountains. This was a very difficult trip so far. Look at this woman. She's looking up rather hopefully, I think, with her child, but is this maybe her husband pulling this wagon? Ay, makes me tired just thinking about it. What about this in the center? What does that remind you of? Ah, of course, the Pieta, the Nativity. This was created in 1861 during the Civil War, and people were very, very religious. Family values, mountain men, but this is definitely the nativity scene. you know, and Joseph is showing Mary the future. This is, they've made it. They've made it along to the top, and now they're gonna look down and see California. And John says, you know, they're trying to portray the whole West in one picture. And in essence, he is trying to do that. You know, he's trying to portray going west. This is manifest destiny, though. God has this plan for our country to move west. And we have up here the three kings. We have explorers. This might be the Nina or the Pinta or the Santa Maria. This is an explorer. Maybe that's Columbus. We could see this on a wall in Salt Lake City. You know, absolutely. You know, that's exactly right. And you know, you have a really good point. Also, who's missing though? We're going west here. There's some people are missing in this painting. Got mountain men, settlers. Ah, yeah, of course, we're missing the Indians. Okay, where are the Indians? They're totally ignored. Actually, they're marginalized, quite literally and figuratively. They're up here. There's an Indian up here and an Indian up here. And that's all we see of us going west and ignoring, marginalizing the people who live there. Obviously, that theme is going to come back. Now, Mary said that there was no African American man in this, and there are no Spanish people. Okay, let's go back to the the African American. When Leutze get this, as I said, this was a study for the Capitol, and it's actually in the hallway in a stairwell on the house side of the Capitol, where tourists unfortunately cannot go unless you probably know somebody. But when Leutze got to this wall, he realized that his plan wasn't quite right, that he had more vertical space than he had actually, horizontal space than he had anticipated. And so it is during the Civil War. And he puts an African-American man in this area right here. He realizes that they went west also. And in the actual mural in the Capitol, there is an African-American man. And Richard says, giant figures on the background mountain evoke triumphalism of white invaders. Absolutely. So it's not hard to get the gist of this story. Right now, it's not on view because they're using this room to store things as they renovate the museum, but it's usually on view. The frame is part of the painting. There's another frame around it. You know, it has religious symbolism and explorers. And that is also in the Capitol. And down here we have Thomas Jefferson, and on the right, we have Daniel Boone. Explorers. And he obviously bought the Louisiana Purchase. Okay, so that, as I said, was 1860. We've seen some, the landscape by Thomas Moran was late 1880 or 1880-ish. And now we're moving ahead and the West is being settled. And now artists are starting to go west. And an artist colony really developed in Taos, New Mexico. Welcome, Kim. All of these works of art are from the Smithsonian American Art Museum in Washington, D.C. There's one work that's at the Renwick, and we'll come up with that in a minute. So look, this is painted in 1909 in Taos, New Mexico. And, you know, this is a romantic, imposing image. He's not looking directly at us, but again, he's a very imposing, serious individual. A little bit like those Catlin portraits, but this is obviously much larger and just a singleton. In anger, Irving Coos did go to Taos. He was one of the Taos Society of Artists. And these Indians would actually come to his studio. And, you know, you send this picture back east and people say, oh, I want to see these noble people. Coos unfortunately took some artistic license with this painting. These moccasins are not moccasins of a Taos Indian. They are moccasins of an Indian who lived on the plains. But artists do that kind of thing. All right, here is one of the first people who went to Taos, New Mexico, and he was really one of the originators of this Taos Society of Artists. Again, look at this landscape. It's beautiful. It's just lush. It's very sunny a lot in Taos. It makes you want to be there. Now, these Indians are here for what is called a sunset dance. Now, I have a question here. A sunset dance is an Indian ceremony. We don't actually see the dancing. Why would Sharp put the cross in this painting? Any thoughts about that?
Is it at a mission?
Yeah, right. There's a church near the Taos Pueblo. And the Catholic Church was really trying to convert these people. But there's a dichotomy here. It's a clash of two cultures, right? If these people are here for this sunset ceremonial Taos Indian ceremony, Sharp does put in the fact that it's right next to the church, and it's the white man's job to try to convert the Indians. So there's definitely mixed messages, and like Richard says, a clash of two cultures. Did I miss a comment there? Oh, yes, John asked if the moccasins could have been trade goods. It's possible, but if the artist wanted to be authentic, he wouldn't have used the trade goods necessarily. He would have used shoes that the Taos Indian would have worn. So, but artists did a lot of that, unfortunately. All right, since we started late, I better hustle along. Now, this is what you think of the West, right? The Bronco Buster on his horse. You know, this is Frederick Remington. Frederick Remington's name is really synonymous with that powerful nostalgia of the vanishing Wild West. So this is circa 1909, about when the Taos paintings were done. And we see these in all kinds of museums of the West. And, you know, they're amazing sculptures to begin with. They're really incredible the way they're balanced, and the bronze, and there's so much movement in this. Frederick Remington, he wanted to go west. and he loved the West, and he actually was a shepherd, a gold, he prospected for gold. He lived as a cowboy. He lived as part of the cavalry. He kind of did everything. And he really wanted to capture that. And, you know, he's really quite famous for that. And rather than talk about a few of these, I think we're going to move on if that's okay. Here's another, this is an Indian on a horse. Again, we see cowboys and Indians on horses. That's that romanticized version of what the West was like. Not to mention, you know, movies about the West and the cowboys and Indians. We have a very different view. We've had a very different view of what it was really like. I love this this sculpture too. You know, there's so much movement in this sculpture. This horse is just moving very fast. The Indian it's called pursued. The Indian is looking back. They seem to be almost flying through the air. And, you know, you could even see the grass moving. And we have a tomahawk here, and a quiver for the arrows, and even this Indian's loincloth is flying in the wind, kind of parallel to the horse's tail. Even though this Indian is being pursued, he's a warrior. He looks heroic. He looks unconquerable. It's a very impactful sculpture. Remodeled means that he sculpted it first in clay, and then he had the original, and then they bronzed it. Okay. And for those of you who live in Washington, D.C., I'm sure you guys know the Dumbarton Bridge on Q Street. I think it's on Q Street. And at the end of the bridge, going north, there's some buffalo. And this is the artist that sculpted those buffalo. So just, you know, when you're driving into DC sometime and see those buffalo, you'll remember Proctor. So 1909, now we're moving ahead, and we're moving into the Great Depression era. And we're also moving into the time where artists were paid by the WPA to make paintings and murals for libraries, for museums, for hospitals, for post offices, that depict a very positive view of America, even though we are in the midst of the Great Depression. But just like the WPA gave lots of workers in industry work, part of that program was also for artists, and they were paid based on the paintings or sculptures or mural studies that they did. And look at this one in 1934. What do we notice about these people? And we'll just talk about it for a minute. This is still 1934. What do we particularly notice about the people on the right? It is a very stylized painting. This is Helen Lundeberg's style. They're very strong people. They're facing the covered wagons, and they are facing the future. They're not wearing hats except a couple of them. That's true. And look at the future. The future is a little bit vague. You know, the mountains kind of almost blend into the sky. So we don't know quite what we're looking for, but it has very dreamlike elements, which would probably have appealed to people who are really suffering during the Depression. And it's very nostalgic for about the pioneers going west. Yeah, and it is a female artist, and we see the women and the children in the forefront. And it's interesting that during WPA, there were quite a lot of women artists and also African American artists that were paid through the program. And somebody said it kind of looks science fiction. It does a little bit. But this is a group of people who are determined, they're hopeful. No one was traveling that way at that time. Well, we're also talking about the Dust Bowl and, how awful that was. And this is not a painting of the awful times of people leaving Oklahoma, Texas, etc., to start a new life in California. They do look clean. It's romanticized, right? And if they, are the people, yeah, and it was clearly a kind of painting that you could escape the Depression if you go west, but people who went to California saw that it wasn't exactly an easy thing to escape. How are we doing on time? I know we started later, so I'm kind of, okay. Now we're moving into the contemporary exhibit that I mentioned. For the people who came in late, the Smithsonian American Art Museum had an exhibit, which has since closed, that we staged with multiple museums in the 5 other museums in the West, to show what the West is now like, and to look at the perspective of different people from the West. The exhibit was called Many Wests, and it included Black artists, women artists, LGBTQ artists, Latino artists, Asian American artists. It really took a much broader view, not only of the history of the West, but what the West is like now. So what I did at the beginning of the slideshow was show the paintings from the 20th century, 19th and 20th century of our romanticized view of the West. And now we're going to look at a contemporary view of the West. Obviously, you all know American Gothic, but this American Gothic on your left is by David Bradley, who's an American Indian, and he's from the Chippewa tribe, and I didn't put that in here. And throughout his career, he's been recognized as a voice for Indian country, and he's really reappropriated and redefined images, both from within and without the Native American community. And he explores using lots of wonderful colors. He really explores issues of self-image, self-determination, and many self-portraits. So here we have the American Indian Gothic, and a pipe instead of a pitchfork. Exactly. And notice the house in the back. I mean, not the house, it's a kind of teepee, and I'm not sure exactly what kind. I'm sure that Bradley would tell us that. So as I mentioned very briefly, Smithsonian American Art also has another museum called the Renwick Gallery. And the Renwick Gallery is the gallery of contemporary crafts. And so what I'm going to show you next is part of the Smithsonian's American Arts collection, but it's actually on view at the Renwick. So, and Kathy mentioned that the Indians on the left aren't dressed in Native American attire. No, they're dressed in contemporary attire, just like you and I wear. That's right. Anyway, so let's look at these two. This is a work by George Rodriguez, and it's called Mexican American Gothic, and it's one of our newer works. Actually, it's probably not even been on display for a year, probably 6 months. The man on the left is supposed to be a field worker, a Mexican field worker, Mexican American field worker. And this is a woman who cleans houses. This is her broom. And she has her apron here. Now, what? Oh, and I'm going to go in tighter on this one. And you notice from far away, it just kind of looks like a lot of color. But these are all just beautiful little individual ceramic flowers. I hope you can see that. Frank, you know, he asked how big these individuals are. They're probably about, I would say, 4 feet high. When I looked it up on the website, it really wasn't clear because there's so many parts to this. And the background is, if I'm 5 feet, the background's probably 7 feet tall. So that's about as close as I can get, Frank. Sorry. Now, what are these artworks and American Gothic all have in common besides two people standing in front of their in front of these backgrounds? What do they have in common in terms of body language? And they have tools of their trades. No, very serious, right? No, very serious. Solidity, that's a great word. They're self-identifying, exactly. And, you know, Bradley and Rodriguez want you to for them to self-identify the people that are important to them. They're static, they're proud. I missed one. Yeah, there are many parodies of this classic painting. There's no doubt about it. Is American Gothic at the in the museum in Chicago? I can't quite remember that bit of trivia. But I want to share what George Rodriguez says. He says, from a distance, the ornamentation is texture and pattern. Upon closer inspection, the individual flowers reveal themselves. Flowers have a life cycle that is in some ways analogous to the process of looking at art, seeing and getting to know a work of art more intimately over time. The work can blossom and expand with more attention and curiosity. And I think when we go to a museum, thank you. So I was right, Chicago. I think when we go to a museum, and I'm guilty about this often too, we walk through an exhibit, we walk through a gallery and kind of glance at things. But I think it's important for us to take a close look at lots of things and not maybe look at as many things. And of course, I feel very strongly that if you can get a docent, you should, or at least listen to the audios. Is the rug stoneware or fabric? I think it's stone. I've really never paid much attention to it. It's not fabric for sure. Okay, it's just like the floor of, it's probably not exactly the floor of the museum, but I don't remember. It's, sorry, I don't have the answer to that question. Okay, now let's look at this woman. I'm going to go back because, oops. The woman is holding the tool here, right, in where the man has the tool. And I think in American Gothic, the man has the tool too, right? I haven't looked at it in a while. Okay, so now what I'd like you to do is take a look at this woman and boy, tell me what you see. Oh man, slide 12. Strength. She's peeved at something. Beautiful, formal attire, provocative, judgmental, passionate, proud, determined, don't mess with me, another don't mess with me. Turbulence, haughty. You know, she's disgusted. She might be. Strength and defiant. Okay, that's great. And look at the background too. This just, you know, what beautiful red, fiery sunset. This is an artist who I think lives near San Antonio, and he wants us to remember the Chicana people in the Southwest. And this is a painting of Sandra Cisneros, and she's actually the author of The House on Mango Street. So she's a very famous author. She might live in the Southwest. She has a real strong attitude and Gone with the Wind background, right? If you looked at this up close in person, you would see that her skirt is just beautiful and beaded. And, you know, she's just a very strong, powerful woman, and we can't forget that. Okay, I'm gonna go through a few more of these rather quickly. This is a work by Fritz Schroeder, and he's a painter and a printmaker. He grew up really not being taught about American Indians. And he's part of the Lozano California Mission Tribe. And he has white ancestors, and he wasn't raised, as I said, in Native American culture. And when he went to Santa Fe to teach a class, an art class, he said, you know, Indians are not portrayed the way they live, and they're not portrayed, they're portrayed in a romanticized way, and they're not portrayed the way they are. And so he really tries to dismantle typical stereotypes. I mean, clearly we saw, you know, we see Indians on horses all the time, and this is a silhouette which almost looks like a mask here. And the horse and the Indian are one of the kids said. As a teacher in Santa Fe, he's mentored a lot of American Indian artists. And I don't usually show two pictures by the same artist, but I like us to take a look at this one. This is a work that he did right around the same time as the horse, the silhouette of the horse. And notice it's an Indian. It's in a contemporary chair. It's one of those mid-century modern chairs. He's sitting on a round rug. He's got his pet dog with him. What do we think about this guy's mood or feeling. Would we know it's an Indian if it didn't say that in the title? Would we know it's an Indian? Nothing about genitals. Maybe you're right. No. And there's a little bit of a hint of Indian culture here. What do we think about this guy's mood? You can't tell what it is. Oh, like a baby elephant. Okay. A necklace in one hand, perhaps. Look at this face. Klimt dreamy. Okay. Klimt is always kind of beautiful to me. Too abstract, anguish. Look at that mouth. Exactly. Life as an Indian has anguish. We don't know if he's been drinking, but certainly we're bringing what we know about American Indians and the problem of alcoholism in the communities. It's a very contemporary abstract painting. It's another car upright to the one hanging down in his lap. Oh, another cat, sorry. Okay. So again, Schroeder is really looking at another side of American Indians. He's also sitting by himself, definitely sitting by himself alone. There's isolation in this. The dog doesn't look unhappy, right? Know this artist from the album covers. Maybe he's a very well-known artist, and his work is in museums around the country. This is another interesting artwork, and do you know anything about this kind of blanket? Do you recognize the blanket? It carried smallpox, a Pendleton, a Canadian blanket, a Hudson Bay blanket. Right. And there were a few works of art that used this blanket in their artwork. And hold on about the membership. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But this artist uses the blanket, and it's really very controversial because Indians did use blankets, and they gave white men gave them blankets, but of course they did carry disease too. And the blankets spread disease to the indigenous people. Some people think they were that they were purposely infected with smallpox, but we don't know that. And then for sure. Anyway, this number 1807-C is her membership number in her tribe. And this is also sort of has two parts. Some Indian groups and tribes use that membership, which is it alludes to the amount of Indian blood that you have, to document that these people are part of a certain tribe. But also, it's used by the government it's also been used by the government for denying Indian people their rights, or persecuting them. So she puts this Indian number, or the enrollment number, in her artwork. In the interest of time, we can think about the body language, the very long hair, might allude to the fact that when Indians were sent to the schools, the Indian boarding schools, that their hair was cut. And somebody said that the Indians were popular with Plains Indian tribes, which is true, and I don't know in terms of her in particular. Okay, this is really a fascinating painting by Hung Lu. She was born in China, and it's her in her art, I should say, she really tries to show resistance to being assimilated into stereotypes that are applied to Chinese Americans. She came to America, she had bound feet. She was probably a concubine. She ends up in Idaho. She ends up marrying a man who owns a saloon. And this is her wedding dress. She might have married him to avoid deportation. We don't know that for a fact, but she stayed with him for many years. So maybe the initial marriage was to avoid deportation. And the birds do look kind of paisley. The mandarin birds and the chrysanthemums are also in Chinese culture, symbols of marriage. So this artist puts that in. Notice her style. You know, it's kind of, the paint sort of drips and it's not clear, but she's definitely calling attention to the stereotypes of Chinese Americans and Chinese people in China. There's an exhibit right now of her work at the Museum for the Women in the Arts Museum in Washington. But again, she has work in, you know, a lot of museums. Her hand might be on a Bible, perhaps. And when you get married, sometimes you put your hand on a Bible. Doug says the head's out of proportion. Maybe, yeah. And she was apparently very short. And as I said, she had bound feet. So it was, you know, you know, you just can't imagine that. But this is a famous woman in Idaho. Her name is Polly Bemis. And she's probably the most famous Chinese woman in Idaho for sure. And her home now is on the historic preservation list. She married this man who was, as I said, a saloon owner, but she really did not need his money. She was financially independent. She took in laundry. She ran a boarding house. She and her husband staked a mining claim, and they were she was like one of the first pioneers to do it with her husband, and she was Chinese. So she really overcame, you know, the domination that she's escaped from in China, and forged her own independence and success as a woman. And someone said that the book might emphasize her education. And you know, I haven't read much about that. But if she was a businesswoman, she probably could obviously read and write, but I haven't read about that. And tears, perhaps, a lot of, as I said, Hung Lu's work has, you know, has these washes of dripping paint. Harmony between nature, animals, and humans. Yeah. And what's her name again? It's Polly Bemis, Bemis. You know, hopefully I'm seeing all your questions fast enough. This is another important picture. It looks like it's posed, whoops. It's posed from a photograph, and that's very possible because there are photographs of her that I have seen. So very possible. Because Howard Hung-Lu knew what she looked like. Okay, so another work by Roger Shimomura. He's a third generation Japanese American. And when he was 3, I think, he and his family were interred in a couple of internment camps, and his family was released when he was 5. But I was wondering what, and Shimomura studied art, and he really combines Japanese style, these are 4 screens with pop art. That's his typical style. And I'm going to zero in on these people, and he's looking down at them, and what are they doing? Not wall panels, they're freestanding, I think, even though they were up against a wall in the museum. They're mulling around, looks like everyday life. You got a mom and her baby, they're talking, the little kid's riding her scooter. There are a jump rope here. There are a few soldiers, but not many. These people are kind of going about their daily life in the internment camp. Why do you think he's in silhouette? Doug asks why the clouds. What color are the clouds, Doug? Dark, foreboding clouds. That tells the story, right? But I'm glad you noticed that. These are very dark, foreboding clouds. It was a hard life. It was an awful life. Yeah, this soldier that's looking down on them is sinister, impersonal. The people are powerless, and it could be foreshadowing Hiroshima, but the year of this is, oh, no, Pearl Harbor was what, 41? So, Hiroshima is a number of years away, but definitely powerless, depressing. And the people, these camps were located in the worst possible areas. There's one camp in Colorado that's on the Great Plains. It's just awful. Ugh. Anyway, I'm going to skip the next one because I really want to get to the last 2. Okay. I'm even going to make sort of short shrift of this one. Wendy Red Star is a Crow Indian. And I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I would go to the Natural History Museum, and there were these dioramas, and they would show, cavemen working, and they would show Indians probably as well. There were these dioramas of people a long time ago. And she's really having a fun time with this. She says, wait a minute, don't look at us that way. This is from a series called The 4 Seasons. And she's really kind of ridiculing those old dioramas and the way we portray Indians. These animals are blow up plastic animals. There are plastic flowers everywhere. There's what's it called? AstroTurf. And she's wearing her native regalia, but clearly she's she's got a lot of humor and says, you know, look at us. These are things are not authentic. She says, people are always telling us what we should be and how we should look and how authentic we should be. It's empowering for me to put my own imagery out there and show my perspective for a change. And the work of art that I showed you here does not belong to the Smithsonian, but it was used for a lot of the publicity for this Many Wests exhibit. And these are works of ours that we have in their prints on paper. And, you know, it's so neat that we can look at some of these artworks that are in storage that well, I don't know if we'll ever see these, but they're great. And before we finish up with the last two slides and a little time for questions, Rick Bartow is another American Indian. He's from Humboldt County, California. And, you know, again, he wants to show us his real experiences. He went to art school. His aunt encouraged him to become an artist. He works in pastels and graphite and mixed media. And he was also drafted and served in Vietnam. And you can see on his sleeve his rank. So he's, you know, he puts himself in that. He suffered a lot from PTSD and substance abuse. And this painting is a self-portrait of him a few years before he died in his wheelchair. And again, is he a hero? He's an Indian. He's an Indian. He's a hero. You know, he wants us to see another part of American Indian life today. And clearly lots of Indians went to Vietnam. All right, so remember I said we were going to we started with a landscape and we're going to end with a map of the United States and then a landscape. All right, the people in LLI in Virginia probably have seen this work of art. So what do you notice about this work of art? For all the others.
It's getting washed away.
Yes, what's getting washed away?
The whole country.
Okay. All that dripping paint. Not all the states are named. Yep. A melting pot. Okay. The East Coast and the West Coast names are obliterated. Looks like there's blood in the middle with that color of paint. Now, would somebody from Virginia like to tell about why we can see some of these names and why we can't see other names? The holdings of Native people are being washed away. Okay, the state boundaries are being washed away. And this artist, John Quick to See Smith, does a lot of these maps. And the words that you can see, these are all words that come from indigenous words. They're all Indian names. Wyoming means mountains and seas alternating in the Delaware language. Kansas comes from the Sioux word meaning people of the south wind. So those are, this artist wants us to see that the cultures of these people who were here long before the white man are getting washed away. The states that you can't see the names of don't come from Indian words. You know, Virginia was the Virgin Queen, and Colorado is color red in Spanish. So only the Indian culture is getting washed away. And her quote is, "We're the original owners of this country. Our land was stolen from us by Euro-American invaders. I can't say strongly enough that my maps are about stolen lands, our very heritage, our culture, our worldview, our being. Every map is a political map and tells a story that we're alive everywhere across the nation." Again, you'll see a lot of her maps and her collage work in museums all over the country. What's the name? Are those Native American names staying? Yes, you know, these states are named after with using American Indian words. And is that the same for Canada and Mexico? I'm assuming so. And notice indigenous people's names are here too, like Saskatchewan. And I hope I'm answering that question okay. And then finally, another landscape. And this is the Rio Verde at the Rio Grande. It's the Rio Verde areas along the banks of the Rio Grande, and it has very steep cliffs on one side. Now I'm going to use this little tool. You can't see it very well, but this artwork is really in two pieces. And Kay Walking Stick does a lot of her work like this. Again, she's in many, many museums right now. And what do you notice about this artwork? And then maybe even how it compares to the very first one that we saw, the Thomas Moran one. Yeah, some people think it's a fence, but it is the cliffs, and a lot of people say that. Yeah, and it really isn't the wall. There are geographical details. The Rio Grande runs through it. She highlights the Rio Grande in blue, so it really stands out. What else do you notice? That, you know, when we looked at the painting by Thomas Moran at the beginning, and there are a lot of the same colors. You know, she does have geological details in this. And it's two views sort of the same area. But look at the clouds, they're really quite lovely. Now this pattern here is very interesting. She puts a lot of patterns, Indian patterns, in her work. And what I just heard a really interesting interview with her. And what she does is she says that she goes to these remote areas and she takes lots of pictures. And she says, I love the quiet of these remote areas, and just many, many pictures. And then she comes back to her studio to compose a painting, and she actually collages it. So you can imagine that she uses different color papers and things like that as her first go round with this scene in terms of collage. It's much more abstract than the first painting that we saw. And then she starts looking and doing research on the area, and she tries to learn about the history of the area. So she she does research about what American Indians lived there or still live there. And in this case, maybe she saw a pot like this from the Smithsonian's collection and put that in her painting. And it's a way of her saying, we are still here. So I'll take that out. And, so the static pattern is against the landscape. And, you go to a museum and you'll say, oh, I saw that artist, because her work is in many ways is very similar. Two really interesting things that I will leave you with that Kay Walking Stick said in her interview. First of all, she was so thrilled that her works are in our museum. She said that the Smithsonian American Art Museum represents who we are at our best. And she also said that art is good for the soul. So I hope you think the same thing. And oh, is this the annual Indian Fair and Market? Oh, I'd love to go to that. Anyway, if you want to know more about the Smithsonian or see any of the works of art, they're all on view, and here is our website. I think here is our website. There we go. You're welcome. Any other questions? I hope I got to most of them in the chat, but I could have missed a few. You were very good about talking. It's hard to do with over 100 people. Okay. Any other questions? For the people who came in late, would you like to see the very first romantic painting? You could, let's see here. Yes, okay, we'll go way back. Sorry to do it this way, it's just easier. That was the first painting that was done in the 1800s by Thomas Moran. Any other questions? Yes, the recording is available, and Trudy, maybe you can tell them about accessing the recording.
Trudy had to leave, but
Oh, okay.
I just want to thank everybody for coming and apologize again for our technical difficulties. It's being recorded. AARP will be sending out a link to the recording to the people who registered, and LLI will also be sending out a link to the recording. It's also on our website on the right side under new recordings new, and so it's not there yet, but it will be there fairly shortly, so you'll be able to access it from the website as well. And again, thank you for your patience and understanding. And thank you, Sarah, for a wonderful, wonderful presentation.
Oh, well, you're most welcome. Somebody said Colorado School, and I didn't understand what that meant.
Oh, I thought they said that the internment camp in Colorado was a historical site now or something like that.
Yeah, it is now. Right.
Oh, Colorado School of Painting.
Oh, I don't know really about a Colorado School of Painting. The Taos School of Artists was a group of artists around the turn of the 19th century, the 20th century. But maybe whoever asked about the Colorado School could ask out loud.
So Sarah, somebody asked for your website. Do you have a website, or were you just going to put up the SAM website?
Yeah, I just had the SAM website up on the last slide. I don't have a website. Um,
So
maybe I
can you
should.
put that in the chat again?
Yeah, I can do that. Let's see, how do I do that? Give me a second.
Or
Okay.
go to the last slide if you,
Yeah, I can go to the last slide. Oh, I know what I'm gonna do. Oh, I'm gonna go out, escape. No, just give me a second. This will be the easiest way to do that.
okay.
So play from current slide. It kind of messed it up, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So americanart.si.edu. Okay. Thank you all.
The LLI website is llinova.org.
Are you still seeing this? Probably. So I stop share.
So I'm just gonna end the meeting unless anybody has anything else to add.
Yeah, and I don't know about a Colorado School of Painting. I grew up in Denver, but I really don't know about a Colorado School of Painting. I know about the Hudson River School of Painting, but thanks again, Debbie. Go
Thank
have a glass of wine and relax now. I know you are very stressed.
Yeah, just a little.
It all worked out.
We still don't know exactly what happened, so.
It's okay.
Anyway, let me, I'm gonna text you in a minute. Or call
Okay.
you in a minute. Okay,
Okay.
thank
all
you
right.
again.
Bye. Yeah, bye.